What do we do when the opportunity that we've waited for so long, like waited for years, has finally arrived? What do we do when we actually receive it? Do we rush ahead because the door is open? Or do we actually stop and still ask God what to do? I believe that most people ask God when they're in trouble, but far fewer seek Him when they are actually successful. And in 2 Samuel chapter 2, David finally steps into kingship after years of waiting. And before he actually moves, he asks the Lord for direction instead of immediate unity, because he's been told, right? It's not necessarily that this was David's ambition. He's been told by Samuel, he's been told by all of the people around him that he will be king, right? But he sees in his life how much trouble, how many situations he gets in where his life is on the line, and he's thinking, Lord, am I actually going to achieve or receive what you've promised? And what's interesting is that instead of unity after Saul has died, Israel descends into a civil war. And we're going to see why God's promises often unfold gradually, and why waiting doesn't actually end when we see the true king here. And we're going to figure out all of this in this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's get a little bit of context into the chapter. Alright, so 2 Samuel chapter 2 marks the beginning of David's reign, but it's not over all of Israel, because after Saul's death, David actually seeks the Lord, who tells him to go to Hebron, where the men of Judah anoint him king over their tribe. So Hebron actually has a lot of spiritual significance in Israel. The second thing is Abner, right, Saul's powerful commander, establishes Saul's surviving son, Ish-bosheth, as king over the northern tribes. So what follows is there's a civil conflict, a major civil conflict between Abner, right? Like Abner who establishes Ish-bosheth as king, and Joab, David's commander. They're both going to meet at the pool of Gibeon, and afterwards we're going to see a symbolic contest actually erupt into a battle. And the chapter actually climaxes with Asahel, who is Joab's brother, relentlessly pursuing Abner despite repeated warnings. So there's a lot of names here. Essentially we have Abner, who is Saul's powerful commander, and then Joab, which is David's powerful commander, and Joab's brother is going to pursue Abner. Abner then kills Asahel, so Asahel, who is Joab's brother, in self-defense is going to be killed by Abner, and this is going to start to sort of plant the seeds of a feud that is going to shape the next few chapters. And this chapter teaches that although God has chosen David, the kingdom does not arrive all at once, and God's promises unfold according to his own timing, even through long, painful periods of transition. Okay, so let's read verses 1 to 11. The focus here is going to be on David seeking God, and he's going to be crowned in Hebron, and Abner is going to make Ish-bosheth king of the northern tribes. Verse 1. After this, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah?" The Lord said to him, "Go up." David said, "To which shall I go up?" He said, "To Hebron." So David went up there, along with his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. David brought up the men who were with him, every one with his household, and they settled in the towns of Hebron. Then the people of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. When they told David it was the people of Jabesh-Gilead who buried Saul, David sent messengers to the people of Jabesh-Gilead and said to them, "May you be blessed by the Lord, because you showed this loyalty to Saul your lord and buried him. Now may the Lord show steadfast love and faithfulness to you, and I too will reward you because you have done this thing. Therefore let your hands be strong and be valiant, for Saul your lord is dead, and the house of Judah has anointed me king over them." But Abner, son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbaal, son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. He made him king over Gilead, the Asherites, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel. He reigned 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David. The time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Okay, so first and foremost, we see that David inquired of the Lord. And I think this is the most beautiful sentence in the entire chapter. After this, David inquired of the Lord. And the reason why is because Saul is dead. Samuel's prophecy that he said before is now going to be fulfilled. And this is important because, David has already been anointed. He was anointed years earlier. He was anointed in 1 Samuel chapter 16, so like 16 chapters ago. Roundabouts. And what we see is he asked the Lord, right? And he asked the Lord because, again, even if we receive God's promises, even if we're successful, that doesn't eliminate our need for God's guidance. The promise answers what God will do, and prayer can reveal when this will happen, where it will happen, how it will happen. And he's learned through years and years and years of suffering that he has often acted from fear, and now he returns to the habit that marks mature leadership, which is inquiring the Lord, praying to the Lord. And we see here that God sends David specifically to Hebron. And the reason why is, and this is quite cool, Hebron is very rich in terms of the covenant history with the patriarchs. Hebron was the place where Abraham settled and built an altar. It was also the burial place of Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah. It was also Caleb's inheritance after his faithful obedience. It was also the place where David's kingship, which is what we're seeing right now, it's where it begins. And this is important because God is showing very quietly that David's kingdom belongs within the unfolding covenant story that began centuries earlier. And the throne is covenantal, right? And David is stepping into promises that have already been anointed. We also see that Abner establishes Ish-bosheth as king of the other tribes, right? And this seems like it's loyalty to Saul's family, right? Because Abner had been Saul's commander for years. However, by elevating Ish-bosheth, who's actually quite a relatively weak figure, Abner is essentially the power behind the throne. So the fact here is that we see that Abner is trying to take control, and many, and this is really important, many conflicts in Scripture are not ultimately about like God's promises or theological disputes. It's actually about power and who will rule. And this is interesting because Israel is divided right now, right? And the reason is because human hearts, both of them, they are divided. And David, although he has God's anointing, Ish-bosheth sort of has the momentum, the political momentum in Israel. And that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a tension between these two things. But God's purposes cannot ultimately fail. And the kingdom will come. It's just, it won't come without conflict because of the division of the human hearts, which is what we're going to see in verses 12 to 17. We're going to see the conflict at Gibeon, which is going to become a civil war. Let's read. Verse 12, Abner, son of Ner, and the servants of Ishbaal, son of Saul, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon. Joab, son of Zeruiah, and the servants of David went out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. One group sat on one side of the pool, while the other sat on the other side of the pool. Abner said to Joab, "Let the young men come forward and have a contest before us." Joab said, "Let them come forward." So they came forward and were counted as they passed by, 12 for Benjamin and Ishbaal, son of Saul, and 12 of the servants of David. Each grasped his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in his opponent's side, so they fell down together. Therefore that place was called Helkath Hazurim, which is at Gibeon. The battle was very fierce that day, and Abner and the men of Israel were beaten by the servants of David. So that was just verses 12 to 17 there. We see that every participant dies in this little battle, right? And it's a limited battle because there's only a few people here. But what we see here is actually a profound observation, and one of Scripture's most profound observations about sin, right? Human beings, we all tend to believe that we can control conflict, we can control sin, but the truth is when violence begins, it develops a momentum of its own. Small rivalries actually become lasting feuds. Careless words can break relationships. And what we see here in the pool of Gibeon is that this is a illusion. We cannot manage sin safely. We cannot be 1 foot in the world, 1 foot in the kingdom of heaven. And the battle escalates because of this very idea. And we're going to see this in verses 18 to 32, where Asahel is going to pursue Abner, right? My question to you is, whilst we're reading this, why does Asahel actually relentlessly pursue Abner in this section? Verse 18. The 3 sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now Asahel was as swift of foot as a wild gazelle. Asahel pursued Abner, turning neither to the right nor to the left as he followed him. Then Abner looked back and said, "Is it you, Asahel?" He answered, "Yes, it is." Abner said to him, "Turn to your right or to your left, and seize one of the young men and take his spoil." But Asahel would not turn away from following him. Abner said again to Asahel, "Turn away from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I show my face to your brother Joab?" But he refused to turn away, so Abner struck him in the stomach with the butt of his spear, so that the spear came out at his back. He fell there and died where he lay. And all those who came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died stood still. But Joab and Abishai pursued Abner. As the sun was going down, they came to the hill of Ammah, which lies before Giah on the way to the wilderness of Gibeon. The Benjaminites rallied around Abner and formed a single band. They took their stand on the top of a hill. Then Abner called to Joab, "Is the sword to keep devouring forever? Do you not know that the end will be bitter? How long will it be before you order your people to turn from the pursuit of their kinsmen?" Joab said, "As God lives, if you had not spoken, the people would have continued to pursue their kinsmen, not stopping until morning." Joab sounded the trumpet, and all the people stopped. They no longer pursued Israel or engaged in battle any further. Abner and his men traveled all night through the Arabah. They crossed the Jordan, and marching the whole forenoon, they came to Mahanaim. Joab returned from the pursuit of Abner, and when he had gathered all the people together, there were missing of David's servants 19 men beside Asahel. But the servants of David had killed of Benjamin 360 of Abner's men. They took up Asahel and buried him in the tomb of his father, which was at Bethlehem. Joab and his men marched all night, and the day broke upon them at Hebron. Okay, so I asked you, why does Asahel relentlessly pursue Abner? And the reason is because, first and foremost, Asahel is described as very quick. Okay, so his speed is actually a metaphor for something, his youthful confidence. And he sees the enemy commander and pursues him relentlessly. Abner repeatedly warns him, "Turn aside, why should I strike you to the ground?" Abner doesn't want this outcome, but Asahel mistakes courage for wisdom, and his determination actually blinds him to what is going to happen. And what's interesting is that the very gift that distinguishes him, that is Asahel's speed, actually carries him into danger because it is not governed by discernment or any form of wisdom. Abner then kills Asahel, and it's portrayed as self-defense because Abner repeatedly urged him, do not come after me, otherwise you know what's going to happen. And whilst it doesn't actually remove the tragedy, right, it actually deepens the tragedy in some sense, because what happens in civil conflicts is that righteous people are forced into situations where every available choice becomes deeply distressing, disturbing, and sorrow, right? And even justified actions like this, self-defense, becomes tragic, and it leaves wounds. And everyone stops at Asahel's body. And this is one of the most, I would say, powerful moments of the entire chapter. The pursuit halts and everyone stops for a brief moment. I remember seeing a movie, I can't remember the name, but it was like basically every woman on earth is infertile. And then there's only one woman who's pregnant, and then she gives birth, and it's during a war zone. And then all of the people in the world have never seen a baby in so long. And then in the war zone, they see a baby for the first time, and everyone just stops, and they all look at her as they're walking down. And the entire war stops, and I sort of imagine it to be similar to this right now. But anyway, the deepest lesson of this chapter is not just that David became king here, it is about how God's kingdom comes. It doesn't happen instantly, and it doesn't happen without opposition, and it requires patience, right? And what's more interesting is that David began his reign by actually praying, honoring, waiting on God, and that God's kingdom advances through dependence on God, right? So God's promise doesn't eliminate the need to constantly rely on Him for humility, wisdom, and perseverance. Okay, let's see how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. So David is anointed king over Judah, but much of Israel actually refuses to receive him, right? Even though his reign has been prophesied, right? It is not yet acknowledged by everyone. And this is actually something that anticipates Jesus Christ, because Christ has already been enthroned at the Father's right hand, and yet the world resists his kingship. His kingdom has truly begun. But we await the day when every knee should bow, every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. That's what we read in the Carmen Christi in Philippians chapter 2, verse 10 to 11. What's interesting about this, though, is that David's kingdom, right, it begins with civil war amongst brothers. But Christ comes to create one new man out of divided peoples. And through his death on the cross, he tears down the walls of hostility that human kingdoms continually try to erect. This is why we read in Ephesians chapter 2 verse 14, "For he is our peace, who hath made both one, and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us." David, he actually inherited a divided kingdom, but Jesus unites all people through his death for sins on the cross. Alright, so how can we apply this chapter in our everyday life? I think the most glaring and obvious characteristic that we need to adopt is the fact that when David receives his kingship, he always sought God's guidance, even after receiving God's promise. How easy is it for us that when we receive success, when we receive that which we want, when we get all of the things that we ask for, we've received so many things that we said we would make us happy, and they haven't. But the thing is, we will receive all of these things, and we forget the one who gave it to us. We forget him who gives us being. We forget him who gives us life. And this is the saddest thing about it all. Because we need to keep seeking God. Even after the doors open, we need to keep seeking God. And we need to ask God not only for promises, but also wisdom in how to walk through them and depend on him. Alright, so that's it for the episode of Biblical Unlocks. We saw that, number 1, David seeks God's guidance even after receiving God's promise. Number 2, Hebron is very important in terms of its spiritual significance. It connects David's reign to the patriarchs and God's ancient covenant. God's promises unfold gradually rather than instantly. We see Abner's resistance shows how self-interest can actually oppose God's purposes, and how small conflicts can become devastating very quickly, and how the chapter actually points towards Christ ultimately, whose kingdom ultimately unites what sin has divided. Next episode, we're going to go into 2 Samuel chapter 3, and we're going to watch how Saul's house grows weaker whilst David's house grows stronger, and we'll explore Abner's surprising change of allegiance, Joab's revenge, and why David's public grief again reveals the heart of God's chosen king. You don't want to miss it. So that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate the show and follow. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.